2024, the Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program was created to collect and preserve the stories and experiences of Florida's veterans and to recognize the state of Florida's military contribution throughout our nation's history. Through recorded interviews, the Florida Veterans History Program Oral History Collection acts as a living archive of first-hand accounts to capture the details of military service and the voices, memories, and reflections of the Floridians who served. The Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program is operated by the Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture's Florida Folklife Program. Together, we are proud to ensure that Florida's military history is preserved, honored, and shared. My name is Julian Duncan with the Florida Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture, Florida Folklife Program. Today is May 17th, 2025. The time is 12:45 p.m., and I'm interviewing Phil Ehr in Miami, Florida. This interview is being conducted for the Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program and will additionally be submitted to the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. Good afternoon, Mr. Ehr.
Good afternoon, Julian.
Can you begin today by telling me when and where you were born and a little bit about your early life?
Okay, I was born in Denver, Colorado. General Rose Memorial Hospital no longer exists. And I was born to two people who were high school sweethearts. My mom, Gail Mather, married my dad, Philip Ehr, Albert Philip Ehr. He goes by Phil. And growing up, he was Big Phil, I was Little Phil. That's the way that worked. And we moved away from that area when I was 7 years old. They had two other children at that time as well. So I was the oldest of three kids. We all moved to El Segundo, California, because my dad got a job in the space program. He was going there for 1 year as in preparatory, working for TRW Systems, and then went out to the Republic of South Africa during apartheid to be an engineer in one of the satellite tracking stations.
And did you move out to South Africa, or was it just your dad went there?
No, all of it.
You all moved to South Africa?
So I spent my first grade in California, second grade in South Africa. I learned to play soccer there. It turned out to be my lifelong sport. And there are some very clear scenes that I recall about apartheid and about animal safaris and about just life overseas that was very impactful for my childhood and into adulthood as well. The travel over to Africa, we went one way in the Pacific, and then when we came back to the United States after only a year, we went through Europe.
And I'll ask a two-part question kind of to follow up on that. One was, at what point did you kind of start thinking about joining the military? Was this something you always knew you wanted to do? And then secondly, so many people join the military for the travel experiences. Do you think your kind of early childhood experiences moving around a lot because of your dad's job played into that?
It helped a little bit, and I see pictures of myself in Army fatigues, and I remember I had little toy Jeeps running around and played with armies, and it was a thing for me for a while. But I didn't think in junior high school or into the beginning of high school that I would be in the service. I always thought I'd be an engineer like my dad was, or kind of an engineer, I guess. And that changed when I started getting serious about thinking about college. And there were ROTC programs that I applied to. My family was not in a position to pay for the kind of colleges to which I aspired. So Army ROTC, Air Force ROTC, and Naval ROTC all got applications for me. I thought about trying to go to academies or apply for the academies as well, but I did not complete any of those processes. Turns out I was very fortunate to be awarded a full scholarship for the Army ROTC program, full scholarship for the Naval ROTC program, and I think I was on a waiting list for Air Force.
Wow. What led you to choose Navy specifically?
Well, it's just, my last name is Ehr, and I liked airplanes, so I thought, Air Force is my number one choice. But since I was on the waiting list, I had to go back to the other two services. And I chose Navy because the Navy can operate in the air, land, and sea, and it turns out space. So all of those things was just more of a full dimensional, more adventuresome career ahead, and that's one thing that brought me there. Also, the number of universities associated with the ROTC program in the Navy was different than the Army, and I wanted the the Navy set of schools. Yeah.
Can you describe your ROTC experience a little bit and also tell us what year you graduated?
Okay, so Naval ROTC can be characterized as a school of hard knocks. My story is not recommended for anyone, and so I went in on a full scholarship. I ended up having a family, before I left, I had some family stress issues. Parents had divorced years later, and I had some just, my head just was not in the right space. And so I went from Maryland to Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana, and joined the ROTC unit there. And it was fine, except that, again, I just was not having a good time, and my grades showed it. I started getting lower and lower grades all the way through. First year was, a freshman year for anybody is, a little bit stressful. Went on my summer cruise in the Navy after my first year, which was great. I got to be on the Montreal boat lift as my first mission in the Navy as a 19-year-old young sailor. And that was a purposeful mission. Exposed me to life at sea, because they did change us from a couple different ships to get on an LPD USS Shreveport out of the Florida Straits to help rescue Cubans who were risking everything for a chance of freedom in our country. And that was great because of that humanitarian mission. Also politically, President Carter had ordered it. And then later on in life, the Republicans didn't like it, but later on in life, the Republicans loved that mission. So it was a win-win-win. We repudiated that cruel regime, we saved people, and we had a win for our country all around. But that was a matter of weeks in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. Went back to my sophomore year, grades still not where they needed to be, and I changed around. And in my time, you signed up for a commitment to the service after you started your junior year. So I didn't go on a summer cruise between my sophomore and junior year, but I went into my junior year, and I, sad to say, but it's true, it's on the record, I got a straight report card of 4 Fs, 4 straight Fs. That's hard to do, actually. And so the Naval ROTC commanding officer, who was a Marine colonel, great guy, Colonel Puller, who I kept in touch with for years, and went to see him well after he was retired and after I had retired as well. So he had said, okay, midshipman there, you need to go to sea. So I went to sea as a non-rate seaman. The Navy offered me, it said, hey, we can boost up your confidence by sending you to boot camp, or sending you to C school or A school with the get you a rating, become a technician, something like that. And I didn't want to take on any further service requirement. So I just said, hey, I already know how to wear a uniform. I've learned how to do that. Send me to sea. So I was ordered to 32nd Street, which is the name of a pier at Naval Station San Diego, and I was attached to USS Leyte, and went into the deck division with other people, and it was started that portion of my active duty as a non-rate seaman.
So at this point, you're enlisted.
Yes.
Side.
And so in that 2 years, I was able to work in a work center that was on the Phalanx weapon system, which is an add-on weapon system, point defense, close-in weapon system. And I learned that trade and struck into the rating of fire control technician guns by taking tests and by demonstrating the competence. And I was promoted to petty officer third class, and then petty officer second class in that rating field on that ship. I earned my enlisted surface warfare specialist qualification. And I had also finished my college degree while I was on board that ship by going to night school when we were in port in San Diego at a couple of different universities that catered to the active duty students, And I remember doing some calculus and other math at sea. It was the best math I've ever done because I had no help. It's just me and the book. I called into the engineering officer from time to time. He was a great guy, and he helped me out with a problem or two. But overall, I was able to shift from engineering to political science much easier. Read some books, took some CLEP exams and some GRE exams, and I was, I guess, add that with my good credits from Tulane University, and I was awarded a degree from the University of the State of New York, Regents External Degree Program. And the Navy ended up rewarding me after my 2 years was up with orders to Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola.
How do you feel that that experience? Because I'm sure at the time it was probably very confusing and frustrating. Your life path is not what you had initially gone in for. How do you feel in the long run that period as an enlisted sailor affected your approach to leadership as an officer down the line?
Well, it was essential because I got to be in. I learned the lessons of crashing and burning, so to speak, and also recovery and resiliency. Part of that 2 years of enlisted service was not just the rating in the fire control technician field, which is important, which is good, it was rigorous, but it was also working alongside folks who didn't have the introduction to education that I had, and often, I don't know, it was hard to understand them because English proficiency wasn't all that great, and but we formed great friendships, and we worked side by side, haul in line, taking stores on board, chipping paint, scraping rust, painting, all that stuff, and cranking in the mess. Cranking in the mess is a term for when you're assigned to additional duty in servicing of food. I was assigned to the chief petty officer's mess, so I would be serving the chief petty officers as they come into their mess, and I could hear them complain about the ship's management, about coming into port, going out of port during our workup sessions, and the chief petty officers would go in there to their mess where I was, their server, and they would let their hair down, so to speak, and tell each other what they really thought, and I got to hear that, and that was that was eye-opening from time to time, and I grew and learned and thought about their role in leading and getting the job done on a ship, and I thought about the role that I had on the mess decks or in the deck level of manual labor on the ship, and as well as the officers. So it was very, very rewarding. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So you said 2 years of this, and then you went to OCS.
Aviation Officer Candidate School.
Excellent. Can you describe that experience, that training experience at Officer Candidate School?
Oh, Officer Candidate School, just like the movie Officer and a Gentleman, except I didn't have the girlfriend. But everything else was about right. We did push-ups in the rose garden. Rose garden is basically a mud pit, and I had all of those, and all of us did in our class. Had the Marine Corps instructors come into our face, like right up when we were at our most vulnerable individually, and had a tag team, and there's yelling and pushing us, and knowing that if we didn't do the physical task, we were burning with both exhaustion, and muscles were just not working sometimes, but you powered through it. And I had a couple of times of them swarming on me to try to get me to DOR, to say I quit, and I didn't. And most of us, the vast majority of our class, went through and achieved and earned our commissions and went on to our various careers.
What kind of training is the follow-on for Naval Officer Candidate School, or for Flight Officer Candidate School?
Well, Aviation Officer Candidate School it's one of the commissioning sources that produces pilots, produces naval flight officers, and produces some aviation intelligence officers as well. So I was in the Naval Flight Officer program. So stayed in Pensacola for basic flight training. Other training included, I was selected very fortunate to be selected for TAC Air instead of Prop Air after basic, which meant the different syllabus, still in Pensacola, and that involved flying, gosh, the T-34, the two different versions of the T-34 of my time, the T-2 aircraft and the A-4, T-A-4 aircraft, highest roll rate in the world. One detachment, we went down to Key West and had air-to-air combat familiarization, and many other things. Many other things in Pensacola. That's basic. Then you earn your wings after you achieve what you need to achieve through flight school. And then I was also then assigned to the A-6 Intruder program, West Coast. So I went up to Whidbey Island, Washington, to Naval Air Station there, and joined the A-6 as a fleet replacement bombardier navigator.
And what year is this when you've completed this training?
Would have been, so I was commissioned in October or thereabouts of 1984, and then completed that portion of flight training. I did other flight training as well, but that portion of flight training in would have been 85.
Okay.
85, late 85 probably.
So I'm curious about, that time period is a particularly interesting one, probably to be on the West Coast, I would think, especially with coming toward 4 years away from the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's kind of a high point in the Cold War. How did that affect your training, your operations, things that you all were doing or thinking about on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so it affected us greatly. So the A-6 Intruder is medium attack. That means our mission was flying all-weather, day-night, low-level into enemy territory off of a carrier, drop whatever weapons, ordnance we needed to drop, and get out. That was one of the flight profiles. That was basically what we trained to do. So from Whidbey Island, which is where the fleet replacement squadron was, we also went to Fallon, Nevada, to what's called Strike University out there, and learned about weapons and all those sorts of things. So you asked about the Cold War and the heightened tensions, what that meant to us. That meant that the whole community of naval aviation trained harder, ever harder, always studying, always trying our best to stay on top of the latest developments of the threat we would face. So we worked our airplanes hard. And in my time, there were a series of accidents where aviators died in my community. We had a period where wings were falling off the A-6 Intruder during maneuvers, put too many G's on it, and or they just accumulated stress fractures and their mechanical failures, in addition to just the normal pressure for students to demonstrate their proficiency in high stress environments. So there came a time we had, I had in the order of 4 or 5 or 6 classmates and instructors that I knew who died in my cohort of training. To include my flight school, my Tulane University roommate, his name was Bruce Palmer. He was on the East Coast when he was in a fleet replacement squadron and died in training, working out for the Libya mission. So, that the pressure, the geopolitical pressure in the news goes right into how we train. We know it's serious. We know we need to work our hardest, and often it doesn't work out. So we had this kind of rash of fatal fatalities in the air. The Navy looked around and they decided to address the problem with by looking at the material condition of the airplane, the mechanics, the maintenance practices, and the training and the students. And there again, kind of on the same line as I had in college, I was not highest on the grades, and so they asked me to leave that airplane and go to a different airplane. So but that was after I carrier qualified, and that's great. But I didn't like at all being asked to leave the A-6 community. But but they chose me because my flight grades were not all that great again. So I went over to the EP3 community. This was a land-based aircraft. We only had 2 squadrons in the world doing what we did in the Navy. Air Force had their version, Allies had their versions. But I was very fortunate to be going from the A-6 Intruder into the EP-3 signals intelligence aircraft, a crew of 32 in land-based. The EP-3 is a P-3 Orion airframe, but stripped of all of its anti-submarine warfare equipment and loaded with electronic sensing measures equipment and lots of different antennas outside of the skin of the outside the main fuselage. And so I ended up going through another kind of flight training. This time was land-based, long-range over water navigation, where I had to learn celestial navigation. Celestial navigation with a sextant, airborne section, put through a port in the cockpit, not cockpit, in the forward, just behind the cockpit, and you have to spin your dials, look at a big reduction tables of big books that showed you what angle, where you'd measure the angle to the sun or some stars or the moon or planets, and you'd get your lines of position, and you get your your fix based on your chart that you'd be able to have at your navigator's table. That was my first role in the EP3, as everybody in the whole P3 EP3 community learned how to do. And I just got to say that's hugely important, and it's important now today because right now technology has advanced so much that we have GPS navigation. When the satellites go out, your GPS is gone, but there are backup systems in modern aircraft with inertial. Well, in my day, there was inertial navigation systems as well, but they weren't all that reliable. They'd spin off. And one time I was heading on a P3 from Hawaii to Guam with an engine out, losing our one of the electrical systems, and we didn't have navigation except for my sextant navigation, one sunline. It was daylight, no clouds or anything, and only one celestial body, the sun. So I had one line, and I had forecast winds. We didn't have Loran was out for some reason. It was the HF backup navigation. It was very unstable anyway, or imprecise, I should say. And there we were, a crew relying on me to turn the aircraft left, right, or maintain course in order to get to Guam and get a radar or get a signal off our nose. And sure enough, I turned it 3 degrees to the left, I think it was, and we ended up alive. So I'm here today because we all learned celestial navigation for incidents like that. One little story.
How was your home life at this point? Were you married? Do you have a girlfriend at home at this point? Do you have a family at this point?
This point in Guam.
Yeah, and these years you're talking about the transitioning from the, I believe you said the A4 to the EP3. It's kind of this
the A6 to the EP3. Yeah. No girlfriend. Not married. Single. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just asking it because I'm curious about these training accidents that you mentioned and kind of the high pressure.
Yeah.
Intense.
Well, I was pining for a girl, but I don't think she would call me her girlfriend.
Yeah.
Me, her boyfriend.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about, family back home and you're doing this kind of intense, sometimes dangerous stuff, and I'm sure your parents probably had concerns and worries and.
Well, yes, and but they're very proud of me, and I'm very proud of them. And my parents had divorced. That was part of my problem in my personal issues in college. My parents divorced when I was in junior high school, elementary school. My mother had remarried. We'd lived with our mom. My dad had gone back to Denver. We were in the Washington, D.C. area at the time, Northern Virginia. And my mom remarried to a man who had 2 kids at home. So we combined households. And my mom, my stepfather, and now 5 teenagers were living, and his mother were all living in a house in Wheaton, Maryland. During my first year in college, my father ended up passing away very suddenly, and that was very distracting would be the most benign word to say. It was hurtful. So, but everybody in my extended family, on my mom's side, my dad's side, they're all supportive, and there's plenty of love in our family, brothers, sisters, yeah. There are other family things that happen, but you know, one thing about aviation and in professional military life or professional life in general, is particularly in aviation, you're able to compartmentalize it, and so that's one box of life, and you know, getting ready to take a mission out is in another box, and that's where you focus, and that's where I got a lot of my internal motivation to go from not just day to day, but project to project, career to career, not career, job to job, and from this group of people to that group of people, whether it would be my crew of my airplane, for which I became ever more responsible for their care and well-being, and the mission, and the conduct of the mission, and the results of the mission. That's what the Navy expected, and I was very motivated by that because it was part of a larger mission to support and defend our country, and the interests that have that you know was given to us, and that was very consistent with what I learned and believed in going through school, about what the United States was all about.
That's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about deployments, missions, kinds of things that you flew, operations you were a part of?
Okay, well, let me go back to the first story that I told you about before this interview, which
Yeah.
was part of my enlisted days. So one time we were out on a cruiser, it's a USS Leyte CG-16 guided missile cruiser, and we were doing not just an exercise, but an exercise that had the Soviet Union very interested in what we were doing. So they dispatched at least one AGI spy ship to trail us. We were part of a battle group as well. One day, the commanding officer called everybody up on deck to take a look out and see on the horizon, as the sun was kind of going down, the Soviet AGI was within view, and you could see through the binoculars men on deck pulling things from trash bags that they had pulled up from our ship. Back when I was in those days, we would put our trash and garbage in plastic bags, and we'd throw them over the side, and that's how we get rid of our waste. Well, you throw them over the side, but you'd always poke holes in it first, or weight it down so it sunk, not so that it floated. Well, somebody didn't do that right, and there's a bunch of garbage bags that the Soviets were able to pick up from their AGI, and they had it on deck. They were going through it. You could clearly see them going through it, looking for secrets, looking for operational plans or something. But I'm sure all they got was waste from the kitchen or other just regular garbage. Even on board ship, we would have shredders to shred paper that was classified. So they didn't get anything. But the commanding officer wanted us to know that we messed up by not having those bags weighted or holes poked in them so that they sunk. And it was a good lesson on operational security. Just one of the little lessons or stories from enlisted days. You asked about aviation deployments?
Yeah, just some highlights you can think of. What kind of missions were you flying? What kind of
Okay, we
were you on?
were from EP3. My first operations squadron was in Guam. It's called VQ1, Fleet Air Reconnaissance Squadron 1. We had permanent detachments at Sugi, Japan, Naval Air Facility there, and also in QB Point, Naval Air Station QB Point in the Philippines. This is before Desert Shield and Desert Storm. But we would fly up from those other locations out into the Sea of Japan, or up toward Petropavlovsk, or down the South China Sea, up against, in international airspace, against the Soviets or Chinese landmass, and to record and observe their military activity for the purpose of gathering intelligence for national command authorities back in the National Security Agency, or to directly support the fleet, the battle group as it was transiting, or a battle group as it was conducting normal operations in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. That was our role, primary role. The reason for being was fleet support, being able to be the eyes and ears out well in front of a battle group to provide indications and warning of attack, indications of how adversarial militaries, mostly navies, but also air forces, were positioning themselves and operating. So we'd fly up in the cold weather out in the Sea of Japan, very mindful that it's dangerous work. Back in the 1960s, well before my time, one of the North Korean dictator's birthday was an occasion for their military to send out North Korean fighters and shoot down an airplane from my squadron. It wasn't the EP-3, but it was a AC-121 or some version prior to the EP-3, and everybody on board was killed. So we had protective measures to be able to deal with that sort of situation, even in my day, flying in the 80s and the 90s.
What kind of relationship did you have with other pilots, and what kind of humor and jokes and stuff like that went around?
Oh, it's great relationships, and lifelong bonds are formed, and they're solid. For most people, people have different personalities, but for example, here we are in Miami, and I just spent a few days visiting my squadron mates from VQ-1 in Guam. Actually, the guy who trained me to be a commissioned commander on the EP-3, and he was there with his wife, who was also in our squadron. She's now an airline pilot. He's just retired from a civilian life of national security, and so they have a nice house in the Keys, and those bonds are great, and we just hook up like brothers and sisters again. It's great. There are professional habits and expectations that you have. I'm very comfortable receiving calls from people and placing calls to people when I have a project that I think they might be interested in whatever field of life, or just commenting about current affairs, all those kinds of things. You have bonds, and they're made in service, and they extend beyond service. I had the very good fortune of having a lot of my career after the first operational squadron in Guam, second operational squadron in Rota, Spain, being in a NATO assignment. My final job in the U.S. Navy was the senior U.S. officer at a NATO command. It's formally called the Joint Electronic Warfare Core Staff. You can think of it as a center of excellence for electronic warfare of NATO, and it happened to be located in England. And so I got the privilege of working with British, French, Turkish, Danish, German, Polish. I can go on. I'm probably missing some. I'm sure Spanish, Italians, lots of Italians, Greek. People in my squadron, and I have, Dutch, pick up and call them as needed, and it's just a warm feeling of allies coming together. That our allies are America's superpower, and I firmly believe that, and it's much more powerful to have. It's much more powerful to have. It's much more powerful to have a force multiplier in allies than it is for our nuclear arsenal, for example. We can get into, we can stand up for America's interests and protect life and property and the sea lines and the air lines of travel with cooperation more so than by the threat of this or that, including nuclear, bombs. That's not really our superpower. That might have been in this Cold War. These days, it still exists, but it's our allies that are our real strength as America.
Yeah, fantastic. And at this point, I guess you're probably moving into a role that is, correct me if I'm incorrect here, but that is probably less flying and more command and administrative. At this point in England and commanding over this.
Okay, well, you skipped a whole lot of stuff. So,
Okay.
so my first tour in Guam was flying out of Atsugi in the Philippines. Desert Storm kicked off in that tour there. So Desert Shield, we were deployed right away there. Desert Shield was going to the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf, depending on who you're talking to, and mapping the operational environment. We weren't accustomed to flying there a lot, so there's a lot of unknowns to understand the pattern of life and then see what's abnormal, and then be more able to protect the fleet who is coming in there, or to protect other U.S. and allied forces, whether it be Air Force, Army, or what have you. So I was privileged to be able to fly in Desert Shield and then also in Desert Storm, and that toward the end of that, my tour was over. I was assigned to the Joint Staff in Washington, D.C. right after that. So I had, again, a very privileged position of helping to be a fly on the wall as General Colin Powell was developing the new national military strategy, which was at the end of the Cold War. What do we get, and a change of administrations from the Republican to the Democratic administrations, and a Secretary of Defense who made it his new Secretary of Defense who made it his calling card to say, hey, justify everything because we need a peace dividend. And General Colin Powell, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, did all of that with a Roles and Missions Commission and the National Military Strategy. And I was in his strategy directorate, helping to make the PowerPoint slides that he would use to go around Washington and the congressional committees and research institutions, think tanks, and present about what we were doing, talk to the media about what we were doing. And that was very eye-opening. Did that for a year, and was pulled into the Navy Yard for an intelligence agency that was also coming out of the Cold War and finding application for national reconnaissance, not just in the Cold War era of looking into the Soviet Union, but now after the Soviet Union had collapsed, applying those very expensive national assets to civilian missions. The National Reconnaissance Office was also changing its mission from a Cold War only against the Soviet Union and other adversaries to how do we get a peace dividend, because the public demanded a peace dividend from the Cold War military capabilities we had. So I was given the job of learning what these national assets can do and applying them to non-DoD federal agencies. So I go to the Department of Agriculture, who owns the Federal Firefighting Service, and deployed one project was to deploy a team out to Idaho with some equipment to help them during firefighting season to know where fires were breaking out in 7 western states, and our national assets could determine that, and they were able to be more effective in their firefighting. The same assets could be used more effectively for the U.S. Coast Guard and the joint interagency task forces that still exist, one in Key West and elsewhere. So I had the job of introducing to the Coast Guard the use of these systems, introducing the Coast Guard these systems to people who are studying the environment, thinking about climate change and researching that. Excuse me. And other such non-DoD federal agency uses. So that was rewarding as part of a staff job. After that staff job, and that's that Washington, D.C. time, 1 year in the Pentagon with the Joint Staff, 2 years with the National Reconnaissance Office's Operations Support Office. I had met my wife and in Maryland, and we ended up moving to my second sea tour for the EP3 community, which is in VQ2, based in Rota, Spain. I take that back. That was wrong. No, I've skipped over something. So after Washington was not to Rota directly, but to 2 years in Naples, Italy. And there's a 2-stars staff there as part of the United States 6th Fleet, who had operational control over that squadron in Rota, Spain. So I went there first as the reconnaissance officer on otherwise P3 staff. I was the one EP3 officer there. Newly married, baby number 1 was born there, and so that was a 2-year job, a 2-year tour. Moved directly to Rota, Spain for my department head tour, which as a lieutenant commander then, and baby number 2 came along, and it's 15 months later. So that was it's kind of how family was going up. Now, since this is history, I got to tell you about my wife. My wife is amazing. She met me, and she's an attorney, had a young career blooming just great in the Washington, D.C. area, but she dropped it all to go have kids with me out in Europe. Go figure. So the status of forces agreement would not allow her to work in Naples, in Italy, so she couldn't do it. That was frustrating for her. Moved to Spain, similar, but fortunately the University of Maryland was teaching courses on base at Naval Station Rota, and she was able to be on faculty there, teaching Law 101, that type of thing, to just get back into the workforce. Lots of things happened operationally with me in that tour in VQ2 as a department head. But just to continue with my family, after that tour, I was ordered to Stanford University in California, where all 4 of us, two young children and my wife and I, packed up and went out to represent the Navy at the Hoover Institution on War, Revolution, and Peace. And my role there was to represent the Navy to academics who were in this think tank. And my wife was able to go volunteer for a law professor. And after that 1-year tour of duty was over, the follow-on assignment from that was a 4-star staff in London, England. So she immediately resumed her career after that and was very happy, well, fulfilled. Happy might be a stretch. She's a lawyer after all, but fulfilled within the legal community in England. And so that was just good. And we were super fortunate to be able to have her kind of profession, and she was able to continue that throughout the last 2/3 or so of my career.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'd imagine that would be tricky, specifically with the legal profession, because different locations have different jurisdictions, different different bar standards, and
sure. But she didn't advocate in courts of law. She was in-house in the corporate sector, in the finance sector of banks in England, and that she was working for several banks, international banks, in-house attorney, compliance and contracts and all kinds of other things. Moving up in a normal career growth, and then in the last part of her career, she changed to a nonprofit.
Right. So you've mentioned a lot of places that you traveled to and places that you've worked in, and are there a couple that stand out to you? A couple locations you've been in that stand out to, whether for short term or long term, that really stand out to you?
They all do. Guam. What do you do on Guam when you're not flying? You learn how to scuba dive. Got that done. In the training command, when I was learning how to fly, I said navigation over long range over water, celestial navigation, all that. Well, I got my pilot's license there too, so that was great to be able to get a single engine land airplane. My license was single engine land from the FAA, so I had my solo flights in and around California. First baby born in Naples, Italy. Goodness gracious. So our baby's name is Jennifer, and she was brought in for her well baby checkup in the Naval Hospital there, and the nurses looked at us and said, something's wrong here. You're the only baby that hasn't come in with the crud. What's up with that? Digestive issues. Well, as it turns out, because my wife is very bright, we bathed her in bottled water. We didn't let her touch any tap water, and that was different from what our family did to what other young families did. And as a result, she wasn't sick. All the other babies were. Spain was very memorable because when I first got to Spain and was requalifying as a Naval Flight Officer in the EP3, I was on board an airplane in the back, and the airplane had a Class A mishap. We were on a mission out of Sudabe, Crete, and came in late one night. Pilot overshot the runway, and we crashed. Again, a big crew. The airplane was totaled, but fortunately, it was crashing, just ran off the runway long. Fortunately, the airplane was disintegrating underneath, and we were just a few inches from taking off some people's heels and feet, but we didn't have any injuries other than a sprained ankle, maybe a cut on egress. So that was extremely impactful on my life and career. As a result of that crash, because I had just come from the Admiral's staff into that squadron, the Admiral directed several immediate actions to change the administrative command from to align more with the P3 community, to implement P3 training standards, because we in the EP3 community had our own training standards developed over time. So there's some pretty big moves, and one of the smaller moves that he made, because that admiral was a two-star admiral, knew me because I was just on his staff, he directed my commanding officer to make me the training officer and lead the path toward recovery of our training program. Big responsibility. And over the course of that department head tour, in which everybody wants to be the operations officer or the maintenance officer, I was the training officer. So great, I get this big stick, but it was so rewarding because we had gone from a squadron of disgrace, of having this accident and exposing a lot of shortfalls in our pilot training program and other training standards for other parts of the other crew members within our squadron and the other squadron over in Guam. That we as a team in the squadron ended up having multiple awards after our recovery. Battle Efficiency, Safety S Award from the Navy, a Maintenance Award, and another one I can't think of at the moment, but these are unit awards that were were very much among the most satisfying to me, because we went from really awful professional performance to stellar professional performance in the area of piloting. We were always been very good at the mission of recording signals, finding out what the adversaries are doing. That part was always very good. We just had a really problematic front-end pilot problem, which ended up in this losing an airplane, millions of dollars in loss, and then having to recover.
That's an interesting take on that. I feel like it's kind of a lesson there in terms of what feels like a setback can be an opportunity for growth.
Well, the Navy and the other services also, but one of the Navy's taglines in recruiting is that naval officers lead fast or something like that. But we teach leadership. That's what it's all about. Leadership from the Naval Academy, from ROTC, from just our life on board a ship doesn't work without leadership at all levels, particularly, so that's why we focus so much on the officer corps, to give ensigns and lieutenant junior grades responsibility and hold them accountable but with the right support to help people succeed, because that makes our ship succeed and our squadron succeed. So when you have an incident like this, Class A mishap, you just buckle down and you learn. You're honest with each other and with chain of command, and you get the right resources in. And it's not like people are really angry with you, but they're also saying, "Hey, this is a team problem." That contrasts greatly with some of the reports that I have seen later on. After I retired, there was a spate of aircraft accidents in Pensacola, Florida, the training command. And I remember seeing in the newspaper a politician saying, "Which admiral are we going to fire?" No, I mean, this politician was saying this just based on crashes. Okay, there's accountability there, certainly, but you don't just roll in and say, "Fire the admiral." You roll in and say, "What's the problem?" If it was leadership, then you address it like that. If it was maintenance type of issues, yeah, that involves leadership as well, but you address the problem first. And so that's the type of thing that's looking at problems and solving problems and keeping the mission at hand foremost, along with people, is why we were successful in VQ2 from that incident.
Excellent. How have you taken some of those lessons about leadership, about teamwork, about problem solving into your own life outside of the military, whether at home or in your professional career?
Well, in the view of how do I take those lessons? I think it's in keeping the perspective of why we're doing things and what our military is all about. We have the strongest fighting force in the world, and it's not because of our technology. It's not because we have massively destructive weapons. It is because of the smart, ethical, talented, and committed people we have serving in the Navy and in the other services. Knowing where we need to be supporting, Navy first, and not necessarily the Air Force. I don't know, but I've been told Air Force wing. I don't know, but I've been told Navy wings are made of gold. I don't know, but it's been said Air Force wings are made of lead. That's the type of thing we used to chant during Aviation Officer Candidate School. But that's just all fun and games. When it comes right down to it, I'm relying on my Air Force brothers and sisters, and they're relying on me, and we are one team tactically, but we come to the same fight from our expertise in the various domains and with our various equipment. So the lessons of life in outside of the Navy or in family is to always look toward the future with positive outlook and understand what you can do and what you can't do, and plan for success and always have backups, and there you go.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. Backups especially. Backup for everything. Yeah, so what around what time did you, or what year did you retire from the Navy, and what was your next step in life?
Okay, I retired from the Navy at the end of May 2008 from my assignment in Yeovilton, England, Royal Naval Air Station, Yeovilton. We had a great retirement ceremony, and I bring that up because I was serving with NATO allies, officers and enlisted and civilians from 15 or 16 participating countries in our unit. We thought it was important, the U.S. contingent there, thought it was important to have a regular retirement ceremony, American style, which is so different than what our allies do. So, and what that was the pomp and circumstance of piping aboard folks and having speeches, getting dressed up in our dress uniforms, and putting the families first. So not putting the families along with me in the retirement. The way we in the U.S., our culture, and you can see it here in this event we were at, Julian, earlier, families are so important to the whole military community. including while you're on active duty, and not just afterwards. Well, afterwards as well. But my family was front row. They were celebrated along with my service in equal measure, or I perceived it as equal measure. And that is something that we knew was different from what the Brits or the French or the Germans would do. And they appreciated seeing that kind of ceremony. So when you tell that story, retired from active duty, and because our children were finishing their high school years, called it secondary school in Britain, I was privileged to be the guy who is, or the dad who's able to drive our teenage girls around to parties or their activities. I was able to devote myself more fully into their lives. Having my last tour, they lived in London. I would commute for the week out to Western Somerset, so I'd be gone, 5 days a week, and sometimes for two or 3 weeks at a time. I know it's shore duty. It's not like a 9-month cruise, but it's not. Dad's not home all the time, so I had that privilege of being with my family for a while. I started a PhD program at King's College London. That didn't work out so well in the end, but it was very good because it also had me teaching at the British equivalent of our war college. It was, got to teach at part-time at a institution called the Joint Services Command and Staff College, as part of the UK's Defense Academy. So that was extremely rewarding because I got to help mid-career officers in maritime, air, and land forces through a syllabus that was like our war college. I'm a graduate of the U.S. Naval War College as well. So that was good. And I also, part of being involved in my family and children's activities was coaching their teams and their friends in the game of chess. I had done the game of chess. It's a competitive sport or competitive activity in England. So even our full time there, I was helping as a dad on weekends with chess teams, in competitive chess teams, and our girls got to play there and moved all around. So I did a lot of that.
Excellent. Well, that's great. And can you talk a little bit about what you do now these days, where your career has taken you up to this point, and how your military service impacts it?
So I was my PhD program was kind of sputtering, and several reasons for that. I'm not quite sure, but that was kind of coming to a close. I was very fulfilled and did great things, I think, helping, being part of classes at the British War College in Shrivenham. And then, so those things were coming to a natural conclusion. My wife was in her career. Our children were going off to college. One was going to college in England. One was going to college in the United States. And I was just called because of the division I saw politically within our country. I felt a calling for standing up for getting involved. I felt a calling for getting involved in public service through running for the United States House of Representatives. So with my wife's blessing, I moved to Pensacola, Florida, where I became a resident in 1984 at flight school, and I ran for Congress in Pensacola, Florida in the 2018 cycle. And then I did again the 2020 cycle, and was in the general election at that point. And I lost, but we did very well by several other measures, money and votes, as compared to others who have tried it. So right now I am continuing my service in politics, in standing up for our country in the best way I know how, to work for unity and supporting our constitutional form of government.
And as someone who spent many years in the military and is now in public service, how does that idea of service kind of connect in your mind?
Okay, the idea of service is core. The naval core values are courage. The naval core values are honor, courage, and commitment. The Air Force is, what is the Air Force? Service before self. I'll have to think about that. But I know the Air Force, one of them is service before self. But okay, so service to our country is something that we all do, and it was drilled into us willingly, and we craved that mission. You asked much earlier about why I would join the Navy. Well, I would say I joined the Navy for, over the other services in aviation, not for the adventure. Yeah, that was part of it. I think it'd be cool to fly off carriers, and I did. It was great, and it's cool to have a mission. But it was the mission, and it was why we would serve as the main motivating factor for me, and that goes straight to the oath of office. It goes straight to defending our country and our Constitution, and that's what I continue to do. When I see our country divide instead of unite, when I see a lot of questionable or anti-constitutional activity from people who are tolerating it, well, you just can't stand. So you get involved in the process, do it with humility to understand that you don't have all the answers yourself, but to get involved in the process where you see something is wrong and you address it with people. So I've learned a lot about how our country has gotten to where it is now, and what needs to be done to correct it. I am 64 years old right now. I've had a wonderful career in the U.S. Navy. I've had a great family and activities outside of the Navy, but I'm called to serve in government in the political space because I know things are going off track. And so I'm doing it in a way that is just compelled by my previous service and my oath of office.
Wonderful. Do you have any a message that anything you'd like to say to future generations, young people specifically, about service, about the military? Any kind of words of advice?
I would say for future generations, our society is going to change. Conditions of our world are changing, both physically, environmentally, understanding of science, including biology, and the ability and the access we have to clean air, water is critical. The access we have to each other for honest commerce, for honest exchange of ideas, and for loving each other is precious. The more we get isolated, or the more we allow information to manipulate our perception and our cognition, I see that as the information war, so to speak, or the information contest about what is real and what is not real, is the main challenge for us. Because if we understand really what is objectively true in science and in our world, we can begin to, and we can, well, not just begin, we can continue to address and improve life. The thing about my career, and a lot of naval officers' career is, and military careers generally, is that you get to do so many different things that are meaningful and have lasting value to our country. And defending it in times of strife, preventing wars, gaining friendships and building partnerships around the country, around the world, is very rewarding work. And when you're able to do that, as I've been blessed to do, to grow a family at the same time, it's just incredible. So, but it has to be done with people who are adventuresome, seeking an adventuresome life, not being afraid to travel, but also being committed to your roots in understanding and loving where you came from, and just helping people all around. That's a very rewarding time. And when you travel, when you operate with folks within the service and folks outside the service with whom you interact, you have lots of opportunities to uphold your values, your personal values, your country's values, and that's quite rewarding.
I think that's a great note to end on. With that, I'd like to say thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much.